So how many properties are in the fund?
I want to say there is 400 different properties across two different funds. So probably about 200 in this individual fund.
So where you have any other investments or any other style of investing into real estate apart from the three things that we talked about? So we talked about duplexes, and then we talked about note investing and the short-term rentals, right? The fund investing.
Yep.
In a year, you have built like four functions, four pillars in your business. How much time would you get back if you set up four pillars and you have now, those four pillars are totally hands off to you?
There's so many different areas of real estate. You're like, oh, what about this? And what about this? And
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's episode of Bigger Life Podcast. Today, we have an awesome guest, Jeff Costa, who also is from Atlanta. He is into tech space, real estate investing with notes, duplexes, and some other exciting stuff. Let's hear it straight from Jeff. Hey, Jeff, how are you doing?
Hi, good morning. Nice to spend some time with you today, Ray.
I know. Well, nice cold weather, right?
I know. I am not used to this.
Yeah, right. So let's get right into that, right? So you come from a technology background. Can you tell our audiences what your day-to-day job looks like?
Yeah, for what we call a W-2 job, I am a product manager for a technology company, and I kind of run a business within a business. So I'm responsible for a specific feature of a database product, and it's super exciting because it kind of gives you a little bit of that entrepreneurial kick that you need, but you still collect a paycheck from a large company and have health benefits and all that. So kind of a really good role, and you get exposure to all the elements that go into running a business for yourself. So marketing, sales, legal, everything goes into it. So it's a good microcosm, I think, for being an entrepreneur.
Plus, you also get a paycheck to invest into real estate, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So, how did you get started into real estate? Talk to us about your first deal and how did you get started?
Yeah, so like most people, I spent a lot of time learning. And what got me into it was I found the real estate investing subreddit, for those of you who might use Reddit, and I started lurking on there. And I kept seeing this name come up, like Bigger Pockets, and I'm like, what is this Bigger Pockets thing that everyone keeps referring me back to? And I figured out it was a pretty short order. It was a website. That dealt with real estate, and I started consuming podcasts like most people do. And I probably spent 6 months listening to podcasts to get to the point where I was smart enough and understood enough that if someone else asked a question of the podcast host, I was like mentally answering the question, and I would answer it the same way the host did. So I'm like, okay, I think I've learned enough. That was like kind of where the threshold was. And then I learned about the vocabulary of real estate. Every industry has its own vocabulary. And then I always also heard in these podcasts of, analysis paralysis, which you can sit there and you can run through deals, but until you've done one, you really don't understand it. And I decided to pull the trigger. I ended up calling a couple of real estate agents in different states. I elected not to invest in Atlanta. I elected to. I was looking at Ohio at the time and Western New York, which is where I'm originally from, and decided on Western New York. So those first conversations, Ray, were just nerve wracking, right? Like I didn't know all the vocabulary and I didn't know what the agent was saying in all cases, but I learned. And that's kind of how I got started, working with a single agent in Buffalo, New York. I'll pause there if you have any questions on that.
No, I mean, Buffalo, New York. And this is which year?
This is 2000. What is it now? I want to say this is 2021. So that was
Okay, when everything was crazy. Were
yes.
you in the beginning of 2021? Yeah, well, 2020 was the COVID. 2021 was still crazy. Yeah, it was, interest rates were still low, but property prices were high, right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
interesting. Like a lot of people, when they start investing closer to them. Like that's how I started investing myself.
Yep.
Well, let me take it back. Actually, my first deal was a land deal that
Okay.
I did remotely in North Carolina. Okay.
Okay.
And the way it happened for me was I was looking for timberland and I found this great piece of land which was on foreclosure, but at the same time, little did I know that I was buying a subdivision.
Wow.
The lots were already there, and I was scared. I knew what I'm doing, but I had this gut feeling that I'm doing something right,
Yes.
and I had no knowledge what I'm doing. Okay, and then I approached. Well, let me tell you another story about from this. At that time, I was working with SunTrust Bank as a VP.
Hmm.
So I thought, and I had a good paycheck, and I thought, and I had no debt whatsoever, right? I thought getting financing on this land deal will be piece of cake. I work in the bank. I'm the VP there. I have a good fat paycheck. I'll just walk right in and I'll get the loan. So I called the banker there and I explained him the situation. He said, Ray, can you come to the branch and we can have a conversation? I said, okay, that's fine. I go downstairs from corporate to the branch and I talk to him. He's like, but we don't do land deals. Oh, what do you mean? Yeah, like there's so much of equity in there. Hey, you're not getting it. As a policy of the bank, we don't fund land deals. We don't give you money on land deals. I can make an exception if you tell me that you're going to build a home on that. I can finance it for 1 year.
Wow.
But within 1 year, you have to start building a home and then convert it into construction loan. And then from there, refi into like a 30-year standard mortgage. I have no plans to build a home over there. I can't do lending. And then he told me what I can do is instead I can, because they cannot give me mortgage, instead I can apply for personal loan, which has no underlying collateral. And actually they gave me more money than I needed.
Because land deals are largely cash deals for the most part.
Yeah, I already knew that.
Yeah.
But, and then this was like one challenge out of financing, but then there were other challenges from the title standpoint and the covenant standpoint, which I had no clue what I'm getting into. But in 6 months, I learned so much freaking about, like how to check the title, how to read the chain of the title, going through each document, the exhibits, making sure that they align, a lot of different things. So everything that you could think that could go wrong went wrong, but then I had to fix on it. So I was the problem solver.
Yep.
And I ended up getting a great deal out of that. But the point is, like, that was just land, not a home. But usually, when we are talking about homes, and you were mentioning about analysis paralysis, right? So a lot of people are scared about investing, and they want to invest closer. How did you decide upon investing like not close but remote?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, why not do it in your backyard in some place you can drive to? And the reason I chose that was what I could get for the price point I was looking at, which was roughly 250 to 350 for a duplex. I was looking almost exclusively at duplexes. That was what I was going to get started with instead of a single family home or anything bigger than a duplex. And what I found was if I was going to spend that amount of capital in Atlanta, what I was going to get was in a less desirable neighborhood than what I really wanted. And even though it was a much farther away prospect to do this in Western New York, I had family that lived up there. And if I had to get up there, we have a luxury of having Hartsfield Jackson Airport here, and I can get there in an hour and a half plane ride. So if anything, catastrophically went wrong, it's not that hard to get there. And it helped for me to have boots on the ground. And coming from that area, I understood the market. I understood in the two cities where I own duplexes what are good parts of town and what are less desirable parts of town. So I felt like I had a little bit of an advantage that I didn't really have and know in Atlanta. And I know it's scary to invest out of state, right? Like it's you can't go reach out and touch it, see it, smell it, taste it, but it is. I am living proof that it is absolutely something you can do.
I need to learn that from you. So, how many units do you own now?
Sorry, I didn't get the question right. Sorry.
How many total number of properties units do you own?
I have two right now. We actually pulled back this year. I was going to buy a third, but the wife wanted to remodel the basement, we had an unfinished basement. So instead of buying another property, we ended up spending that money on the basement. But I try to buy at least one property a year, with a goal to getting to at least 10 individual properties within the next 5 to 7 years.
Great. I mean, and I have heard a lot of that, and that if your goal is to at least buy one property a year, you are doing much better than a lot of, average population over here. Within 10 years, 20 years, you have such a great portfolio that can fund your retirement and other goals that you have set for yourself. Plus, if you look at it from an appreciation and a cash flow standpoint, it just kind of aligns
Yeah.
so much better.
Well, what got me is like into real estate in the first place was I was getting sick of putting money into mutual funds that I had no control over what the outcome would be, right? I don't run the company. I don't make decisions for Tesla, let's say, right? So I felt like with real estate, you got a better span of control. I could force appreciation on a house by doing a remodel. I could, like you said a moment ago, get the appreciation and the tax benefits. I just didn't see that in other investment vehicles. And for me, it was initially a diversification move. But as you get into real estate, you realize it can really 10x your wealth and your net worth by doing the right things and in the right ways.
Absolutely. If you look at it from appreciation, leverage, depreciation, and cash flow, and those four
Yes.
levers within real estate, I don't think there are many asset classes that you can get all those four levers. Plus, I believe with real estate, it's a very forgiving asset. If you made some mistake, it will kind of autocorrect in 5 years, 10 years, whatever that time frame is. Well, I'm not saying that somebody should make a mistake, but if you make,
Yeah. And I think what keeps people away is there's always this kind of, it's kind of a trope at this point of, I don't want to get the 2 a.m. my toilet's blocked call. But like I have property managers that I employ in each of these two cities. So I don't get those calls, but people don't realize that that is a possibility. Not to say that you don't have to manage the manager, manage the property manager to some degree, but it's largely hands off. But I think a lot of people get scared and paralyzed because they think they're going to be on the hook for every little thing. And it does not have to be that
absolutely, and especially it becomes more hands off when properties are remote,
way. Yes.
right? So you have to, it kind of forces you to have a property manager or some kind of a boots on the ground locally versus when properties are much more closer. Like for me, my properties are much more closer to me, and I tend to be, you know, just by virtue of it. I just want to go. If somebody calls me and tells me I don't have a property manager in that sense, I'm the property manager. But if my tenant calls me for something, a lot of time I just send the crews out. But
Yep.
sometimes I just want to go and take a look. But for you, it's kind of like, okay, let the property manager handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
it's painless. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, there's still decisions to be made. I had the property manager doing inspections this week of two of my units, in tandem with uh, an annual furnace cleaning and inspection going on at the same time. So like, I'm still coordinating some of that. Like, it's not completely hands off, but I don't have to be there waiting for anything to happen. I can continue in my regular work, and it's not a distraction.
And are these regular rentals or are they like Section 8 or via some kind of a program?
These are regular long-term rentals, both of them. They both do really well. They're in what I would call lower B class, upper C class, probably near to upper C class neighborhoods. But I selected property managers that really did a good job of vetting the tenants. So in a multifamily environment, tenants tend to rotate out probably every year, on a typical basis. But I've been lucky that in one of my properties, both of my tenants have been long term tenants who take really good care of the property, pay on time. But if you're investing in multifamily, you should expect much more turnover than perhaps if you were investing in a single family home. So it's been a little difficult because those turns are not what you want to see as an investor. You want to keep your tenants happy and in place, because turns cost money.
Yep, absolutely. Turnover is costly, and if you can keep those tenants in for whatever, right? So it's better. Now let's talk numbers.
Yes.
So, how much did you pay for these properties? What kind of revenues are you generating?
Yeah. So I'll talk about. I'll pull these up so I have them. So the one in Buffalo was acquired. Let me pull these up so I can give you the exact numbers. The one in Buffalo was something I purchased in March of 2022, and I want to say let me get the price on that. It's Sorry, I have to go back and get I have to look at the sold records. Here it is. I bought this one for 169, and it was literally a 1-1 duplex. It was the smallest thing footprint wise I could get started with, and the numbers didn't freak me out. I'm like, okay, it's not a $500,000 house; it's 170K. And it was a 1-1, and a relatively small square footage, probably it's 1,800 square feet total. And I was in competition. This is when rates were low, and I ultimately won it. Offered a little bit more than the other person who was there. Zillow thinks it's worth 210.5 today, so a nice little increase in just appreciation. But it was all done with the help of a real estate agent up there, who also, this is one of those integrated real estate agent and property management firms that really do it all. They have a construction arm, and I felt very confident with them. They knew the market, they understood everything. They did their own analysis, which I appreciated from an investment perspective, to go along with my pro formas and what I was writing, so I could kind of see how they compared and contrasted. And I just pulled the trigger, and I will tell you, Ray, I was nervous as heck, because I did not know what I did not know. And you go into this stuff, and you have to learn by contact. Part of being a business owner is solving problems. That, in fact, that is what I think the whole purpose sometimes of being a business owner is you solve this problem, then you go on to the next one and the next one. And for me, it was just a learning experience. This one, in terms of revenue, right now, it is the revenue after paying the property management fees is 1563, and the mortgage, excuse me, is 1165. So the revenue after the property manager is $400 a month. So it's pretty decent when you think most people look at about $100 a door. This is about $200 a door. So it's nice, and I do the typical things that investors should do. This goes into I have a reserve fund, I have a maintenance fund, and that sort of thing. And so that was the first home, and I spent probably a year on that, and got comfortable with what it looks like to look for a tenant, how they actually come into the property, how they're onboarded. You learn about how to read a statement from a property manager to understand what's going on in the property. There's a portal that you have to interact with, and so forth. So that was the first purchase, and that was in March of 2022. And then my next one was in August of 2022, and this one was in Rochester, New York, which is a little bit to the east, about an hour east of Buffalo. But this is where I grew up, and I really felt comfortable with this property. It literally is a mile and a half from my sister's house. So worst case scenario, I could be like, hey, Jen, please go over and look at X. And she could be there in a few minutes. So that one is really well performing. This one I purchased. I'm going to go back. Hang on, I got to get the numbers for this one. This one was purchased for $225,000. Right now, Zillow estimates this to be worth $286,000. So just a couple years, a nice little appreciation. But again, I don't really look at appreciation as anything more than a gift. My father used to have this saying, Ray, is like there's income, and then there's ifcome. Income is that thing you get from your paycheck. Ifcome is if all of these things go right, then you get this other money. And that's kind of how I look at appreciation on a house. But this one does very well too. This one has After the rents after paying the local property manager are 2340, sorry, 2366, and the mortgage is 1559. So after that, it comes out to $807 a month. That is really really nice, and I will even say that one of these tenants is below market. And although I raise rents by about $20 a year, $30 a year, she just is one of these tenants who takes such good care of the property. Like, I don't want her going anywhere, so I'm not gonna like boost her rent to match the other tenant. Um,
Mhm.
this is the kind of tenant who like texted me one day and she's like, "Hey, they were doing something to fix the electrical on the outside, and they took off the fence gate." And she has a dog, and she's like, "I replaced the fence gate and put a new lock on it. That's a little easier to use than the one that was there. I hope you don't mind." And I'm like, "Do
Yeah.
I mind? How would I mind?" It's the kind of tenant that you dream about having.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Good tenants are hard to come by, and when you get them, you don't want to lose them.
absolutely,
Well, two things, right? So one, you got a home run on this deal,
yes,
and two, I really like that word "if come." So we have always talked about appreciation, in which a lot of projections, when you see, is kind of accounted for, and then they just like, hey, you make 10% or 12% out of your money. But I like it if come.
yeah,
If it comes, then you have it. If not, then
yeah.
you never know. I mean,
And I
all
don't
right.
you don't control appreciation, right? So if these things happen and the neighborhood continues to improve, or new employers move in, all these things that are outside your span of control, but it's a nice bonus to have. And I really think that you have to look at both as a real estate investor. Like, what's that cash flow, and what do you think the appreciation is going to be?
And have you claimed depreciation on that?
Yes, yes. I found an accountant who understands real estate very well, understands how to capture depreciation and so forth, and it makes it nice because you make all this income and you get your tax return and you owe nothing on that income because you're able to depreciate it. So
Yep.
almost a hidden gem of real estate, right? Right?
But cheat sheet, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So in the previous conversation, you mentioned about talking to or evaluating property manager. So,
Yes.
what challenges did you face when you were looking out for property managers, or what exactly were you looking out for, and how did you come out about evaluating the property managers?
Yeah, so I had a great first experience with a property manager in Buffalo, but when I searched for one in Rochester, I had the exact opposite experience. And it was so bad that I decided to write a book about it because I learned so much about how you actually should evaluate a property manager. And I'm like, I know other people have this pain. So like I'm gonna put this out in the world. This is not I am not becoming a millionaire from writing a book on property managers, but it seemed like the right thing to do. But like I when I found this property manager, he came as a recommendation from my real estate agent, which is oftentimes what you get, right? You want a real estate agent that has a good Rolodex, who can recommend contractors, property managers, and so forth. So this guy apparently was managing about 6 other properties for this agent that I was working with. And I met him on a phone call, and he seemed great, had a military background. I'm like, that's awesome. My brain was thinking structure, processes, all these things that you typically would associate with someone that has a military background. So when I went to Rochester before I closed on the property, and I met him, and I went to his office, and then he had an office in a building that was essentially kind of like a leased workspace, right? Many different companies in one tower. And I walked in, and it was a nice space. He had a conference room, he had an office, and we sat down. And while we were in there, he was taking calls from contractors uh, he was building and flipping his own properties. And I'm like, oh, this guy's really well connected, right? He knows people and contractors. So I was getting like a very positive vibe, and then I asked him like, hey, what software portal do you use to collect rent, and what's the owner's portal? And he's like, oh, I'm planning on building my own. And he's like, I don't really like what's on the market. And I'm like, and my lizard brain being, a software product manager was like, cool, you're building your own thing. I like that. Building software is my thing. Um, and I look back on this now, and it's all red flags. Ultimately, this property manager, in the middle of a contract, ghosted me. And I only found out about this because the tenants would were basically told to contact him. he stopped responding to them for a period of time. And then the tenants who had my number ultimately contacted me, and he didn't respond to me. No phone calls, no texts, no emails, nothing. It was as if he disappeared from the face of the earth. And I even ended up calling the receptionist of the building that I had gone to that day. And I'm like, hey, is so and so still a tenant in your building? And like she's like, no, he moved out, X number of months ago. And I mean, it was just I was still paying him, and it was just like this nightmare situation. I had to go scramble to get a new property manager, and all these things, Ray, that I thought were really really good, in terms of good signals, were ultimately things that I did not know were bad signals. Like when I walked into his office, there should have been 2 to 3 people working there. Property management is not a solo career, right? It is a team sport. Where he was doing his own properties, where I thought it was great that he had all these contracts with contractors, what that ultimately meant was he's going to spend less time on my property. And the fact that he didn't use off the shelf software to manage the property was like, that's just silly. Just pay the software as a service, whatever it is, fee a month, and don't build your own. So it was super easy for a novice like me coming in to not know this. So I ended up, and I'll pause there for questions. I can go into what drove the book, but that was the
Yeah, this is good. So I'll just say this. I mean, no questions, but it's interesting that you mentioned about software. And many times I have these conversations, and because I also come from a tech background, back in the day, like again, this is when you are like, when you're taking life as a different thing, and anything shiny, and you want to approach it, and then you're thinking technology, and I come from a business background, then I'm thinking business to it,
Mhm.
and it's a perfect cocktail of going wrong.
Yeah.
And I would start on a project, and then you're thinking about bringing the product out with perfection, and ended up doing nothing, right? Because you have all this developed, ready to release, but not released product that's sitting with you, and then life takes over, and then you have the next shiny object. And what I have personally learned is, and this is my personal thing, I have developed so many different mini projects or products for myself that I thought, okay, I need to build this thing in for my own thing, because the other product on the market is a little bit expensive. I can do it for much cheaper and better, right? Even if it's not like a polished product, who cares? All I need is a script that works and does the work from like a Python script or whatever. But I have almost stopped using any of that or developing any of that. I would now, my approach is, if I need something, I will look at an established product, pay the subscription, or if there's a lifetime deal kind of a thing, or perpetual license or something, buy that and live with that. Because a lot of people have used it, so there's a lot more testing that has been done on that product, and B, I don't have to invest time to figure out the product life cycle, which you and I, we both know it takes a long time
Yeah.
doing that. And C, it's working.
Yeah.
Listen, if 100 customers are using it, it can have all the bugs that you and I we can talk about. But at the same time, we have to appreciate that the 100 people are using it. It's working.
Absolutely.
No product out there is perfect.
Everything has bugs.
Everything has bugs, and there will always be bugs. So uh, I have stopped any custom development for last, I think, maybe 10 years now. And my life is so much easy, because now if I need something, I just go on Google, find some product, read some reviews, and evaluate the products and buy something that I need. That's it.
100%. 100%.
Plus, now I'm more focused on to doing things rather than the actual thing that I always wanted to do was stuck, because now I have created a huge pipeline for myself, right? Only once my development will get completed, then I will do this.
Yeah.
Wrong approach. Now I'm focusing on the money, the things that will produce money, rather than things that will save me money.
Yeah.
Right?
Smart.
Building your own product, okay,
Oh,
it will save me money. But going out and buying property or doing something, that's what's making me money. So now I always try to put it into two buckets. So anything that I'm trying to do, I'm trying to evaluate it into two senses. Is it going to save me money or is it going to make me money?
Yeah.
If the answer is, and I've asked this question myself, right? If the answer is it's going to save you money, I just look for outside. I don't want to save money. Let's put it this way.
Yeah. Yeah. Build the
Okay.
top.
Yeah, just go with something that's out there and just do it.
Yeah.
Like this podcast as an example. I can edit it myself and it will save me money, or just hire somebody and pay them and let them do the editing. I don't want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It,
So
it, it,
rather,
it comes from an understanding of that your time is not free, right? Like,
exactly.
and
But
the more you think about that, the better your decision making becomes. Like, have you ever heard of a book called Who Not How?
I think I've heard about it. I
It,
have not read it. I have not bought it yet, but I need to uh, buy and read it.
it's
But I was reading another book. It was, and I think I'm still kind of learning that thing, and I'm a little bad at it. It's called 10-Minute Manager or something like that.
mhm.
How to manage the whole, your people and the whole show in like 10 minutes or less. It's like Scrum Master thing, right? Like how do you do a Scrum thing? So that's how you should be. But I'm still a little bit more involved into things. My biggest challenge right now, I don't know what your challenge is, but my biggest challenge right now is building the team and delegating, because we, as a virtue of it, as I was talking earlier, like saving and all that stuff, we're always looking to do it ourselves. And even if you're delegating, it's so hard to delegate. It seems so simple, right? But
Yeah.
it's not.
No,
It's a art in itself.
and that's what this book is about. It's very common as an entrepreneur or someone building a business to think, okay, and I mentioned this a moment ago, I'm a problem solver, right? So how do I solve this problem? The maturity and the growth of someone as an entrepreneur is moving away from the how do I solve this to who can solve this for me. So a good example, when I started out, like most people, I was keeping track of stuff in a Google sheet, all of my real estate investments. And then I finally realized I need to do accounting, like real accounting, and use accounting software. I didn't know the first thing about it. And I started to learn. I built like a chart of accounts in QuickBooks. And then finally, I'm like, why am I spending this time? I am not an accountant by trade. I could pay someone to go set this up, take what I've got, and oh my God, this was like one of the best things I ever did, because I met a woman who has here in Atlanta has a practice, and she took what I had, built everything for me. I think it cost me, I don't know, a couple $1,000s, maybe not even that. And oh my gosh, now it's point and click. Transactions flow in, they go to the right place. My books, I can look at any day of the week. I can get a snapshot of like exactly what my balance sheet looks like and what my income statement looks like, where before I was guessing. But like I was ready to go do all of this myself. But you realize it's not about how you do it, it's who can help me? Who can I pull in to help me accomplish? Who can help me, edit this podcast? Who can help me do this accounting? And that to me is where you start getting that maturity level, and it lets you focus on building the business than being in the business.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. You need to have a CEO mindset, right?
Yes.
And I was listening to somebody else, and exactly, and that's where I think we all should be focused on, where you are working on the business, not in the business. And but it's so easy to get sucked into it, right?
So,
Especially for the things that are like my background is technology and business, but what I do for the bigger firms is this: what you were talking about, the chart of accounts, the accounting. That's what I work on. And when I look at my business, I just don't want to give it to somebody else, because I'm like, I can do chart of accounts piece of cake. I do it all day long.
yep.
But at the same time, it takes time away. I mean, it takes time.
Yep. You could be looking
And
at the next deal that could come your way instead of trying to build a chart of accounts. But I totally get why it's an easy trap to fall into.
very, very easy. Great. So yeah, so you had this not so good experience. And so what happens next?
Yeah. So I actually started to. started a Google sheet, and I kind of broke it up into categories. And I was thinking about like, if I was doing this again, what questions would I ask about his business, about how he screens tenants, about how his technology reporting and portal platform is, how do they manage repairs and maintenance? And I ended up coming up with this almost like 6 or 7 page Google sheet. And then I thought, well, cool, I can just send this out to someone if they ever ask for it. But like, I know the answers to some of these questions. So what I did is I wrote a book that had 100 questions. I kept it to 100 in all these different topic areas that you could just jump into. And it comes from pain, like people oftentimes write books because they've gone through something, and I did too. And I'm like, how can I help other people? And you learn little tips and tricks along the way. Like, if you're going to evaluate a property manager, go look on their website to see how they have promoted the existing properties they have for rent, because it's going to be telling that that is how they are going to put yours up. What do the pictures look like? Is the description good? Are they highlighting the amenities of the property? And it's little tips and tricks like that that you learn by going through this. And that's what prompted me to do it. It was more of kind of scratching my own itch, Ray, than anything else. But it was
What's the name of your book?
it's called. It is on Amazon. It's just an ebook. I never got it printed or anything like that. And it is. I haven't looked at I have to pull this up. It's 100 questions you should ask a property manager. So the
All right, listeners, if you're listening to this, go ahead and buy that book, 100 Questions to Ask a Property Manager by Jeff Costa. Definitely, you'll have some questions and it will make your life easy on the property management stuff. Now, I manage my property myself, but if I'm looking for a property manager or if I'm thinking about like a deal which is outside of me, I'll definitely give it a read because to your point, I don't know everything. If you have gone through the pain, I don't have to go through the same pain. It might take me 30 minutes or an hour to read the book, and it will tell me what I need to ask. And you have solved my pain by your pain and by you kind of publishing it and helping us. And thanks to you, man.
Yeah, no, and I think everybody should, when you're doing a pro forma and evaluating a deal, plug in the cost of a property manager, because while you may be doing it today, your life may change in 5 years. Maybe you have a child or a parent gets sick, and you no longer have the time to do the property management things you were doing today. And what you don't want to have is like, oh, all of a sudden, because I have a property manager, my property now becomes unprofitable. So I always encourage people, whether they're going to use a property manager or self-manage, that when you're evaluating a property to purchase it initially, plug it in there, right? Plug it in. Even if you're going to do it yourself, make sure that it makes sense with a property manager in place.
Absolutely. Or build a teams. What I'm trying to do here with my business is I'm trying to build a team because A, I'm a licensed real estate agent. B, I work a little bit more on the short-term rental side, which means we have a lot more touch points than a traditional rental. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build a team, or we have built some bit of it. I'm still involved, but you know, I'm still in the business. I'm not working on the business yet, but I hope in next 2 to 3 months I will be working on the business. But the idea is where I want to be totally hands off. Where if I'm, for whatever reason, let's say I'm in a blackout for 15 days, 20 days, I take a vacation and no phone calls, nothing, right? The business should self operate without me watching. And I was talking to somebody and they mentioned about a 90-day thing where you hire a person and you fire a person every 90 days. What that means is you hire a person, right? And within those 90 days, the idea is that the person or that particular role is either taken over by that person and you fire yourself out of the business,
Ah,
right? So somebody needs to be fired,
yeah,
whether it's me or whether it's my employee or the contractor, whomsoever that is,
that's a great perspective.
right? Somebody needs to be fired. so, so the more times I fire myself means the more good job I did at building my team.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then you think about whether it's accounting, and it could be contractors. When you say hiring somebody and firing somebody, it doesn't mean that you have to hire full-time people. It could be, hey, you hired a bookkeeper who is working, part-time on a contractual basis for you, and for 90 days you kind of let it go, or 60 days, whatever you can say, it's 60 days, right? And they have done 2 months closing for you, and you say, okay, this works good. And then you have fired Jeff because now your only role is to just evaluate your reports. That's it. You
Yep.
should not be making entries. You should not be doing anything else. The bookkeeper should only be presenting you the reports as a CEO, and you look at it and you approve it, and you're like, okay, approved, done.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then you look at the next role. Maybe it's evaluating properties as an example. So first 30 days maybe goes into training the person. The next 30 days maybe goes into where the person is kind of in the passenger or on the driver's seat, but you're on the passenger seat,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where they are working and you're just helping and hand holding a little bit. And the last 30 days is where you're actually evaluating as a CEO. Now, in 90 days, after that 90 days period, now is the time to evaluate that person or yourself.
Yeah.
If you are still involved, then fire that person. If you're not involved, then fire yourself out of that role.
Yeah.
Why are you still doing it?
It's a really good mental model.
Yeah, I mean, 90 days, hire somebody, fire somebody. And I was like so amazed. And about 40 days mark, you should know which direction you're going.
Yeah.
Because if you have to fire somebody else, that means you need to find a replacement.
Yes. Yes.
Either in the same role, or if you know that you will be firing yourself, then you have to start thinking about the next role that you're like, maybe social media marketing, maybe something else. I mean, I don't know, but
Yeah.
whatever your business entails. But within 1 year, if you think of it, every 90 days, in a year, you have built like 4 functions, 4 pillars in your business. How much time would you get back if you set up 4 pillars and you are now, those 4 pillars are totally hands off to you? Think about that.
Yeah.
It's mind boggling.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a really good mental model to think about it. And it's always just so easy to be an entrepreneur. Like I remember growing up and my dad was an entrepreneur and like he took out the garbage, he did the billing, he did the R&D, like he worked with the accountants, and I'm like, you can't do that. Like you'll never build the business if you're focused on all these little things. It's you
No, no.
focus on what is really driving this business forward.
So we had a salon in Brookhaven. We started in 2016. Actually, we bought it in 2016. And by the end of 2017, I was telling my wife, we need to sell this. She's like, well, we were making good money. We had awesome reviews. She's like, we are doing awesome with the salon, right? She had the attachment to the salon. I'm like, well, we are making money. But the problem is, I wanted the salon to be more like working on the business. But what I noticed was that she got sucked in and she was working in the business. And she was just getting sucked in deeper and deeper every day because now the clients, when they will come back, they just wanted her. I'm like, and now not only that, the clients wanted her, but then she also has to be managing other employees, being the manager, being the owner. I'm like, that's too much. But we ended up selling the salon in 2022. And with COVID, I mean, there were so many bad things about COVID, but there were also some good things about COVID. When that 3 month break happened, where everything was shut and she was home, that's when she realized for the first time what she was missing. And she's like, after this ends, let's sell the salon.
Yeah, it's easy, right? To get like you're like you feel like you need to solve every problem, but like
Yeah, no. And that's the reason I think 2021, we said, okay, we will sell the salon, but now still the retail industry was still bad. But at the same time, we start focusing on real estate, and 2022 is when we actually sold it.
yeah. Well,
But
and if you listen to any podcasts on there's a whole set of podcasts on build not buy, like build a business, don't just try to build the next piece of software that is going to change the world. And one of the things they talk about is they call it single man or single person risk, where a business is becomes so dependent on one person that you could never sell it, because if that person leaves, the business falls apart. And like you were saying earlier, you need to be able to go away and realize that your business is going to continue on whether you are there or not, whether you're on a 2 week vacation in Europe and can't be reached, it is still going to persist. So,
Mhm.
100% agree with that.
Yep. Alrighty. So you wrote that book. Then I also know that you invested into notes.
Yes.
So talk to me about notes.
So,
What are you
notes is like this. I got interested in it because somewhere I heard this phrase and it kind of keeps going around in my head. In real estate, if you're going to be anything, be the bank. And I keep thinking, I was thinking about that, and I got into some reading about notes and how there's like a secondary market for real estate notes. And my only exposure to it was being, a primary homeowner and, signing my own deeds and as we bought houses, over the years. But notes was kind of, it's almost like a black art. Like there was no big community around it. You have to kind of really get in and learn. But what I found was there are ways to invest in notes that act as bonds effectively. Like most people are very used to stocks and bonds. So what I found was I ended up using this website called PaperStack, where a lot of these notes are sold and purchased, and it's kind of a brokerage or an intermediary. I found a note that was pretty small, and I just closed on it like last week, so this is really new. And it was a piece of land in the Poconos in Pennsylvania. And for those who may not know the Poconos, it's a very much a recreational area. It's about 2.5 hours north of New York City. A lot of folks go there for a variety of different reasons. There's resorts, there's hunting, there's fishing, summer sports. And I found a piece of land uh, in an already existing subdivision, and it looked really really good. So I had to learn again, as if I was coming in cold, as I did with buying a long term rental. You have to learn the vocabulary. I have to know who do I talk to help me review a note and all the documentation that goes with it. So I had to find that. I had to find a servicer for the note. You know who you send your mortgage payment to every month? That's the servicer. So for an individual note, I didn't want to be in that business. So I pay $30 a month. But I had to go find the servicer and interview them and talk to them. But this note, as simple as it sounds, has an 18% return, which if you look at the not the typical return of a stock market investment, it's 6, 7%, maybe 8% good year. But this is I'm essentially buying the note from someone, and there is already a borrower. Why can I not say that word? Borrower who is paying in on the note and has never missed a payment. I know who the borrower is. So we looked at the background and the history, and essentially he's making a profit because the person I bought it from someone else, and he gets to make a profit. I get to have this note, and this thing kicks out like $384 a month in straight cash. Now deduct $30 a month for the fee of the processor, but like it's it's better return than I can get in a bond, and it's a 5-year note, not a 30-year note. So as the capital comes in, I can recycle it and buy another note. But it's a much better return than anything else. But you had to learn all this stuff. I had to learn how to use a financial calculator, which is not hard, to be able to evaluate what the return on a note is. I didn't know how to do this 6 months ago. And then finally, I realized that there's this whole concept in software of build in public that is very popular today, of people who are building software things, and they document it publicly, both the highs and the lows. So I decided to start a subreddit related to notes investing, and all I was doing was documenting what I was learning along the way. And maybe it'll turn into a book, who knows? But like for me, it was, okay, well, what does an allonge look like? An allonge is a document that accompanies a note that shows you the chain of custody. And I didn't know what one looked like. I couldn't even go find one. So I'm trying to add value in much the same way to others. Like, here's how I evaluated the servicer. Here's a list of services who I thought were good. So all of this, Ray, was kind of a big learning experience. And again, I started small. Like I started with that one duplex. Like a 15 grand note is not going to break the nest egg, but it was a fantastic learning experience about how to do this and what to look for when you buy a note.
Awesome. What I really like about you, Jeff, is that not only you're learning, but you're also sharing. You're sharing the pain points, you're sharing your journeys, just like the property management thing that we talked about. And now you're talking about this note investing where you have documented your journey as you're learning. And I'm sure as people are reading it and then they are also kind of chiming on it, and if you have a question somebody's answering, or if you were like, okay, here's the three servicers, then maybe somebody else is saying, here's, by the way, here's 10 more, right?
Exactly.
And now you're documenting all that. But what goes around kind of comes around, right? So karma. So that's a good thing. I love that. So you recently closed on Node. So you took some time to educate yourself on the node building. So you have one node or you have multiple nodes?
One note now, but now that the first payment is coming in January, so I officially take over on December 19th. It's December 7th now, so still waiting for it all to finish up and onboard the borrower to the platform of the servicer. But now that I've gone through the process and I know what the steps are, I found a great company in California that evaluates all the notes documents. Now that again, almost the same thing with a short term rental or a long term rental. You got a set of cleaners, great. I buy my next short term rental in that market. I have a cleaner already set up and ready to go. Same thing with a note. Now, if I want to buy a second note, I know who to send all the collateral to so that they can evaluate it. So, ideally, that the friction goes down, and the next note, which I will purchase, it should be a whole lot easier. And it was kind of like, I got to get the wife on board with this too, right? Like she wants to understand where the investments are and what we're doing. So I kind of kept her in the loop, and I always do on all this stuff, but she understands where things are. And if my next note will probably be larger than 15K. So you know I want her to be on board and understand like why I made the decision I did.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you start small and then you go from there. You kind of expand onto it. Great. And then we also talked about you invested into like not actively but passively into short-term rentals, right?
Yes, yes. I've always wanted to do short-term rentals, but we have a 6-year-old, and up until probably about this year, I did not have the time to essentially get into the hospitality business, which is what I view a short-term rental as. It was just there was just too much demand from a child, of a toddler growing up, baby and a toddler. So I was looking for a way to get that same exposure, uh, but not purchase a property. So I found a private placement fund that got recommended to me, and I love what they were doing because they were and are ridiculously transparent about revenue, about expenses. They open their books, and I felt like it was an easy way to get exposure to this, and they focus on short-term rentals that are not just houses, but they focus on the amenity side. Like, hey, here's a short-term rental with a pickleball court, or here's a short-term rental with a pool and a hot tub and a fire pit, and they definitely have a niche, and they have replicated their success in different states in the country. So to me, and again, it was there's levels of investing. I think the minimum they had was 25 grand, which is what I put in, and I get quarterly payments out of that. And I got the first one in November, but I also get to learn by the same process because they write up a very detailed evaluation of every single quarter, what went right, what went wrong. Like for example, we had hurricanes come through some of the properties. So they were very transparent, like, hey, it's going to cost us this much money to rebuild this and repair it. But to me, it was a good way to kind of get my feet in and learn without actually buying a short-term rental. So again, I always look at this as like you're paying tuition to learn, essentially, like to
Yeah.
learn how to buy a note, to learn how to do a long-term rental or a short-term rental.
So how many properties are in the fund?
I want to say there is 400 different properties across two different funds. So probably about 200 in this individual fund.
Got it. And they're adding more properties to this fund
They
as
do.
they find something.
They do, but they have a very rigorous process of how they vet a property, what the property performance is, how they do their own pro formas on it. But like a lot of times, if you put money with someone, it's not as transparent, right? You don't know how they make decisions. You don't know what their criteria are. These guys, that's what really got me is, and it was a bunch of some of the folks on the team were like, tech refugees, I would say, who come from technical backgrounds,
Ah,
Airbnb,
nice.
and I was like, okay, they understand how technology can be leveraged to help them do what they do. So
Nice.
that was
Nice.
appealing as well.
So, where you have any other investments or any other style of investing into real estate apart from the three things that we talked about? So, we talked about duplexes, and then we talked about note investing and the short-term rentals, right? The fund investing.
Yep. Those are the only vehicles that I'm in today. And again, largely it's just, well, I was always looking at thinking, what's the least amount of time commitment that I
Yeah.
can invest in real estate without taking time away from spending time with my daughter. So, the note passive.
Absolutely. You have built a system in place because even with your duplexes, it's like hands off to you. And notes and the fund investment is definitely passive. So I think that's a great model to get started where you're making good returns at the same time. It's kind of like nothing is ever passive, but it's passive active.
Yes. Yes. And that's what I was looking for. Like, I don't mind the manager or, making decisions once in a while. I mean, the whole thing might take a couple hours a week, maybe,
Yeah.
it's not, the time demands are just not there. Not to say that I don't want to get into short-term rentals. Like we had, before the baby was born, we were looking in Panama City because it's, it's pretty quick drive to get there from Atlanta. And we never pulled the trigger on condos, and I wish I had rental, right on the beach. But maybe we'll get back there one day and get into that space.
Okay. So what's next for you? So in what direction are you focusing next? Where are you, how are you strategizing yourself for the next, let's say, 6 months to a year?
Yeah, my next thing is going to be, I'd like to get a larger property still in Western New York. So I'm looking at a sixplex and a fourplex. So I'd like to get to that 10 doors a little bit faster than just collecting duplexes over the years. So that's what I'm kind of looking at now. In fact, I actually sent an email to the agent this morning asking for the rent roll and all the documentation. But at the same time, I feel like the note space is also a really good place to be. There's a point where I think I kind of want to do what you're involved with as well, Ray. Is funding fix and flips is also, I think, a great area to be in, and learning about how to structure a note and seller financing and how to lend money in general seems to be a direction I also want to be in. Like I go back to that. If you're going to be anything in real estate, be the bank. Fewer headaches than you might have in other ways, other areas. So, but that's kind of where I want to go. Like maybe a bigger note, perhaps with a property attached. There's also this kind of compelling, again, going back to this. I know we were talking about this a little earlier. I think real estate investing always has this shiny object syndrome where there's so many different areas of real estate. You're like, oh, what about this? And what about this? And for me, the idea of flipping land is also kind of interesting too. Now that I've bought my first parcel of land, there's a whole set of folks who try to buy land that's in the path of progress, that ultimately a developer purchases to build new builds, as you were mentioning earlier. And that's kind of compelling too. Like, how do you build can you find a piece of land that is in the path of progress that you could carve up into parcels, and sell those independently? So I feel like that's also a compelling direction as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many different ways how you can make money with real estate. It just depends, right? Like notes and investing into the fund. Well, notes is more like a interest income. With the fund investment, you will still get the depreciation and all that because they'll still get you the K1. Sometimes you want that depreciation side of the things, and definitely those duplexes or the sixplex and the tenplex that you're looking to buy. That's your, let's call it an active portfolio, right? because you can make the decision on them. You can decide when to force your precision on them. You can decide when to sell them, what to do next with that. Although you are passively invested in those in the sense of you're managing it passively. You're not passively invested, but you are actively invested, but your management style is passive on that.
Yes, exactly.
What I also like to talk about to people, since because I come from a technology background, right? What kind of technologies are you using today to help you streamline all this work? What's your tech stack looks like?
Absolutely. And it's funny because if you talk to people who are entrepreneurs, one of the common refrains you'll hear again and again and again is, oh, I wish I had set my systems up so much earlier than I did. I wish I had had systems in place when I started. And I heard that loud and clear. So to me, there's a few things that I use pretty regularly. I used to do all of my evaluation of a property pro formas in a spreadsheet. And then I discovered this website called dealcheck.io that I use pretty regularly now. And instead of me, and again, saves time, right? So I can pick a property, it pulls in all the relevant details. I can set some parameters so like it knows what the interest rate would be and that kind of thing. And then instead of me filling out little fields in a spreadsheet, boom, it's all there. And all I have to do is tweak the numbers. Like I get my quote from the insurance agency about what the insurance cost is going to be. I figure out what the property manager is going to charge for it. Plug that in. So it's any that was a big one to me to learn how can I make decisions faster when evaluating a property. And in a competitive market, time is value. Speed is, I should say, is valuable because most of the time you're competing with other people to get a property. So if I can rule out a property much faster using this tool set, that is just a benefit to me. I can just go next and move on to the next property and realize that this one does not work for my buy box and what I'm looking for. And I think of all of that, that has been super helpful. And the other thing, it's going to probably feel simplistic, but Google Docs and being able to share them with my property managers in terms of we actually rewrote a lease and I improved upon the lease that the property manager was using, and all of that was done through collaboration in a Google Doc. And then I'll say the third thing that I use a lot is FaceTime, and that's because when property managers, when we're looking at houses, they're using FaceTime to walk me through the property, and doesn't always work so great when you get into a concrete basement. So that's where pictures come in. But that technology lets me see what pictures do not. As a remote investor, I can see what the layout of the property is. I walk it. I can look at something that I've seen in a picture and say, hey, in the kitchen, can you focus on this thing that I saw in the photo? Is it a water stain or a shadow? Or that kind of thing. I think that has been super helpful. And then I'll say the last thing, the last system is people. I actually am part of a mastermind, and one of the guys in this mastermind happens to live in Pennsylvania, and he's like, and when I was introducing this land purchase, he's like, I drive by that area all the time. He's like, you want me to stop by and take a couple photos? And I'm like, yes, please. And it's land, right? There's no structure on it, but I'll be damned if he didn't go do that for me, and I get an email with the photos of this piece of land that, I mean, granted, I probably could have gone up and drove it, but like the connections that I have made through a Zoom meeting that we do every week allowed me to get a picture of this property in a way that I would never otherwise have gotten. So I try to leverage it wherever possible, right? I guess is the way I'll answer that.
Yeah, definitely. You need to have the right tech stack and also leveraging, whatever you can leverage because those systems, technologies, people, I mean, those in place makes your life so much easier and it helps you accomplish more than what you can do by yourself.
Yeah. One more I forgot to add too is Chat GPT, or I actually use Claude. And there's this great fear out today of, oh, AI is going to take your job. No, someone using AI is going to take your job. And what I mean by that is I was able to use it in ways that just really really helped me. So when I was buying the piece of land, I'll give you one example of this. when I bought the land, there was something that's done called a perk test, PERC, and it's short for a percolation test. So this is a bit of a rural property that has no ties to a sewer system, and will if someone ever builds on it, they have to build a what do you call it? Oh, why? A system to handle the sewage. Yeah, exactly. So they have to test the soil to ensure that you could actually put that in. And that test is called a perk test. Well, I got a copy of it back, and I am not a soil engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but I actually uploaded it into Claude and I said, here's a perk test for this property. Please evaluate this document and tell me what I should know about it and what it means. And it went through it, and in like 30 seconds, here's an evaluation of a perk test that I would otherwise not have been able to figure out or had to pay someone to interpret for me. And what it gave me the confidence to say was the soil is good on this property. You can put a septic system in. And but again, without that little tool, how would I have otherwise come to that conclusion? I think people sleep on AI. They've heard about it. They might know something about it, but you got to start using it, and it can streamline what you're doing in so many ways.
Yep. I mean, sometimes when I have to respond back to some guest or some question, they can do a better job than what I'm, because I'm still like my answers are short
Yeah.
because I again maybe in the technology field, I'm not as of a people's person because you write code or whatever you're trying to do. The emails are short,
Yeah.
right? I got
Very binary, right?
yeah, but with this AI does such a better job about that customer service touch to it and being polite, adding that thank yous and welcomes, yeah, hospitality, right?
But it's important stuff, right? Like
It is.
in my W-2 job, I write what are called product description documents, and I write them myself, but then I get AI help to kind of punch up. And when I handed it to my developer, the lead developer, he's like, Jeff, I usually run all documents through Grammarly to make sure that they're that I understand them, and they're well. He goes, you scored 100% on Grammarly. He's like, I've never seen that, and I'm like, well, it kind of wasn't me, but it was me. But that kind of thing. Like if I'm adding clarity to my conversations with an engineer so that they build the right thing, that is immensely valuable. If you're doing what you're doing and you're adding the proper greetings and salutations to foster a relationship, that is also tremendously valuable. So
Absolutely.
yeah, totally.
Well, great. This has been such a great and insightful conversation, Jeff. So, if our viewers want to reach out to you and connect with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm the best way is on email or Twitter. I'm at CosJeff, COS as in Sam, JEF as in Frank on Twitter. Email is the same, cosjeff@gmail.com. So happy to talk real estate. It's a passion of mine, as I know it is of yours, Ray. So if anybody wants to get connected, that's probably the easiest way.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. And to our listeners, I'm sure you have learned a lot from Jeff, especially with his all this knowledge sharing with property management and the note side of the things. So you can find his book and his subreddit on the Reddit website. And thanks for tuning in. And we'll be here next week with another episode. Thank you.